Hello, Facebook friends. Sorry, I flipped my phone horizontally, but apparently you can't broadcast live if you have your phone flipped horizontally. So maybe somebody in the comments can tell me how I'm gonna be talking to one or two people about a few things. And I want to bring them on Facebook Live with me to talk about a few key issues. And I don't know how to do that. So I see adding somebody. We'll figure it out. Welcome, everyone. My name is Suzette Martinez Valladares. I am a Republican, Latina, woman, mother, millennial, running for U.S. Congress in California's 25th Congressional District. This district encompasses the areas of Simi Valley, Santa Clarita, Agua Dulce, Acton, Palmdale, Lancaster, Lake Los Angeles, even a little bit of Los Angeles, the city of Los Angeles, and the Porter Ranch area. This seat has been held by a conservative for over 36 years until last election cycle, when the liberal progressive Katie Hill campaigned on being a moderate, asking voters to elect her so that she could represent a purple district. She sold them a raw deal because she is actually a liberal leftist progressive, actually left of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Ilhan Omar, Rashida Tlaib, who also happen to be her squad sisters. So this district is a traditionally conservative district with conservative shared values and moderate values. So Katie Hill does not represent our community's values, and I am running because I think that we deserve a representative who, one, will articulate their values and positions, who is not going to be staunch partisan, who really owns who they are and represents the values of this district. So Donald, welcome. Thank you for joining in. And Gayla, I haven't talked to you in a few weeks. I'm kind of missing you a bit. We need to connect. Maybe let's have coffee in the near future. So Donald, yes, this is actually my 12th Facebook Live Town Hall. And my consultant Jimmy and I talked about doing these Facebook Live Town Halls. I wanted to be very transparent, very active on social media, on Facebook, on Twitter, on Instagram. Yes, I'm on Snapchat as well. So when Jimmy and I first talked, I was adamant about having a huge presence on social media. And one of those things is doing our Facebook Live Town Halls every Wednesday at 8 p.m., rain or shine. When I am elected in 2020, I will be elected on a Tuesday night, because it's going to be a landslide, right? And I will most definitely be doing a Facebook Live Town Hall on Wednesday, November 9th, right, 2020. And I am committed to doing these Facebook Live Town Halls because it really gives me an opportunity to talk to you about the issues that are important to our district. And unfortunately, Washington is thousands and thousands and thousands of miles away and a 5-hour plus plane ride. So I will have to be in Washington definitely more than I want to. And these Facebook Live Town Halls will definitely give me the opportunity to talk to you. So good question. Yes, I will continue to do these Facebook Live Town Halls after I am elected, and then I'll also do them live in person. Max, thank you for joining us. Thank you so much. So, guys, I feel like this past weekend, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what's been going on in the campaign this past week, and I feel really guilty. And I'm just going to confess that, last week you guys were on Facebook Live with me last Wednesday, and last Wednesday was the year anniversary of my mother's death, who last year went home to be with Jesus after he called her in her battle with pancreatic cancer. So I decided that I was going to spend some time with my family and my brothers. So we went up to the lake this past weekend and had some really needed family time. And it was really bizarre for me to not be campaigning on the weekend, not attending some type of community event. But, you know, I have always said in all of my jobs as an executive director and a leader that family comes first, especially for key moments in your life where you can never relive the death of a parent. You can never relive key moments and weddings and funerals. So for individuals that are important to you, never choose work, never choose a passion over being there on those life's moments that just cannot be relived. So I did go to the lake and I feel a little bit out of touch. What was kind of most devastating and sad for me this weekend was I want to talk a little bit about the mass shootings, and in Gilroy, in Dayton, in El Paso, and I am a gun owner. I am pro Second Amendment, but we have a serious problem in our country right now. And it has been a growing and escalating problem. And this crosses presidential terms. It's not one president's fault. It's not one person's fault. There's definitely a lot of partisanship going on in Sacramento over this, or I'm sorry, in Washington over this issue. But before I do that, before we talk about this really important issue, I just want you guys to all take a moment to say a prayer for the individuals that have lost their lives to these mass shootings and gun violence this past week and in our past period. Lord God, I just pray that you be with those individuals' families and that you show them mercy. Lord, you are our Savior, and whether you practice any faith, there is nothing wrong with prayer. And I have been criticized for extending and offering my prayer to these individuals and these families this past weekend, which is really heartbreaking because, you know, prayer means a lot to me. It's what got me through losing my mother to pancreatic cancer. It's what's gotten me through some very difficult times in my life. Near-death experiences, and the power of prayer is real. And I don't care if I'm scrutinized or criticized. I will always offer my prayer and share my faith with others. There was a really interesting article that I read today because that I want to share with you guys. Because what I'm hearing now from individuals in the community and individuals like me who are mothers, who are parents, who are teachers, who work with the public on a daily basis, is there's just this growing fear to be in public because this all hits home. You know, I was talking to my husband and I'm like, do I need to go to Walmart at a different hour? Do I leave Charlotte home? Do we not go shopping as a family anymore? Why all, you know, there's just so much fear. And I think that every American can sympathize with this. And yes, we need to have a conversation and about why this is happening and what the solutions are. And I read a really interesting article today. It was an opinion piece in the Los Angeles Times, and it was a opinion piece by two individuals, and they're escaping my name right now, but for the past 2 years, these individuals, through it's called the Violence Project, have been researching mass shootings for the last 2 years, and it is a partially government funded project, and they're truly digging into the data, void of partisan bias. They have strictly been looking at the data for the past 2 years. They've looked at mass shootings and the individuals and all of the instances and motives and just done interviews and research on mass shootings since 1966. And so guys, this is the first, I guess, data-driven analysis of mass shootings that we've really ever seen. And they came to some very, in this opinion piece, some very interesting conclusions. And I'm going to see here, I think I copied it on here. I'm going to see if I can paste. No, it didn't. Okay. I will make sure that I paste this article later. But they came to some very interesting conclusions. And while the shooters definitely have a profile, there's somewhat similar, somewhat different. They came to 4 conclusions that are just truly eye-opening. So I wrote down some notes here. So where I usually kind of go off the cuff on this, I'm going to read this. So the first conclusion that they have is that all of the shooters since 1966, at some point in their early childhood, suffered from some type of trauma, violence. They witnessed their parents commit suicide. It's had some type of violent, traumatic experience as a small child from the ages of 2 to 6 and even 8. And this trauma eventually manifested into mental illness, to severe anxiety, and even suicidality. So, I, coming from a background of early childhood education, of early childhood intervention, and seeking greater access and awareness for the importance of early childhood intervention, I think this is something that is crossing bounds and that we really need to look at as a culture, as a community, as a country, and try and minimize these traumatic experiences. And we could have a very long conversation about that, but it's something that I'm passionate about and is really interesting. I've also seen this, within my own family. And while, I mentioned last week that I had 2 nieces that whose parents were addicted to drugs when they were little. Crystal, my oldest niece was born into it, and when she was 4 and when Savannah was 2, their parents were in a very violent relationship. They were addicted to drugs, and sure enough, just like I mentioned last week, when my niece turned 13, 14, started to experience some severe anxiety, severe depression, and suicidal tendencies. And it is just so imperative that we increase resources for mental illness, and specifically for juveniles who need resources so much. So that was one of the first commonalities that the research revealed. The second thing was that all had a traumatic or critical, life-changing incident or event that triggered the mass shooting, or their mass shooting, or events leading up to the shootings. And I think that we've seen that as these horrific things have played out in the media. That's something that I remember, that whether it was breakups or whether it was family death, there was something traumatic that actually happened in their life to actually trigger this need and this violent outreach, or these violent shootings. The third reason is most study, this is really interesting, guys, most study the actions of other shooters to validate their own motives. So people in crisis have always existed, but the media and this constant news cycle that give notoriety to shooters are actually creating this environment where people who are looking for validation that had these 2 other factors, whether it was childhood violence and or recent or traumatic experience, they actually research, they look at these shooters as heroes and examples of what they're supposed to do, and they're looking for attention and notoriety, and they're seeking this out as kind of a last resort, and even a suicidal resort, because most of them know that they'll most likely die during their mass shooting. And then the fourth reason or commonality that they found is all shooters have had the means to carry out their plan. So this is like the last of, yes, they did have access to firearms. And it was interesting. They say 80% of school shootings were the shooter obtained their weapon or gun from a family member. So not necessarily legal, but they had access to a weapon from somebody in their family. Workplace shooters tend to use their guns for their violent act, and those guns were owned legally. And lastly, other public shooters mostly obtained their guns illegally. For instance, we saw that in the Gilroy shooting. We know that in California, we have some of the strictest gun laws in the United States, and the Gilroy shooter actually obtained their gun from Nevada and brought it into California illegally. So these were the 4 commonalities that, again, this is the first I've ever seen any data that truly looks into the roots of why this is happening. And I also just think anecdotally that culture has changed in the United States. And whenever this happens, you know, we're all outraged and we're in fear, but we aren't actually putting money and resources into the root causes of this. And to simply take the approach of, we want to take away everyone's guns, or we want to give everyone guns, to take those two extreme approaches really does and gives, it is an injustice to the people who have died because of this type of gun violence in the past. And to not recognize that there are environmental factors that are leading to mass shootings is irresponsible of us. Mental illness, child abuse, a lack of true early childhood intervention. All of these factors are within our means as a society to put an end to this. So I do want to see, I do know that there was so Michelle, I believe Anthony or Jesse were going to hop on to talk a little bit about their perspective on this issue. So I'm going to see if they jump on here. I will log them on. But I would really like to know your guys' thoughts on, you know, on what we need to do. I am pro Second Amendment. I do not think we need to infringe on the rights of law-abiding citizens. I am for common sense oversight and things that will really allow us to uphold the Second Amendment for citizens without infringing on their rights. So until Jesse hops on, I think I'm going to take a question here. And I did see one. Hi, Gina. Gina, so lovely to see you here. Thank you for joining us. Oh, okay. Okay, so John says, good points about the commonality of mental illness and copycat behavior in mass shooters. This country does not tend to address the root causes of violence, instead focuses on peripheral issues. No wonder it never gets close to a firm reduction. And you're absolutely right. Like, just taking away guns or putting on additional regulations is not getting to the root causes of why this is happening. And to just say that that's the solution is again, it's irresponsible, and it's an injustice to individuals who have died because of this type of gun violence. Great. We are on the same, we are on the same page with this. Good timing. Oh, I'm not going to link to that because then I'll move off my, my forum here, but I'm going to try and loop in, guys, Jesse. Oh no, actually, Michelle, if you're out there, can you ask Jesse to jump on, guys? So I'm going to give Jesse a little bit of lead, and if not, I'll talk about another issue in just a moment here. But so Jesse is the founder and head of Lexit, and Lexit is a movement. It's kind of like Blexit, but it's Lexit. It's Latinos leaving the Democrat Party. You guys may or may not know who Candace Owen is. Candace Owens is a founder of Blexit, which is blacks exiting the Democrat Party. And there are these great conservative movements ran by millennials. Jesse, who is responsible and in charge of Blexit, just has an amazing story. He is a conservative Christian who was actually a past gang member who was shot and partially paralyzed because of gun violence and a gang lifestyle. And through the grace of God, and he found Christianity and he found a new family in Christ and was saved and started Blexit, the conservative movement. Be sure to check out his Facebook page, the Blexit Facebook page. If you have a moment, and hopefully we can get him on so he can just give us his own personal perspective of gun violence and this issue, and even from the perspective of an ex-gang member. What is really interesting about Jesse too is kind of some of the parallels on why I became a conservative. I grew up in, is he on yet? Not yet. Okay. I grew up in the area of Sylmar in the city of Los Angeles. It's right next door to Santa Clarita, butts up to like the Newhall area. And I actually, had gang members, drug dealers. I lived on a good street, but the next street up had gang members and had drug dealers. And my brothers went to Sylmar High School, Ala Vista Middle School and Sylmar High School, where they got involved with drugs and with gangs. And because they actually got in quite a bit of trouble that had really lifelong consequences for them, my parents actually refused to send me to Ala Vista Middle School. And then, I ended up going to Sylmar in 10th grade. But that was after spending 5 years in a private Lutheran school, because while my parents could not afford to send me to a private school and my younger brother to a private school, they sacrificed. My father picked up additional jobs. My mother picked up jobs. And, she did nails, actually. She was an esthetician in her younger years, to try and put us through private school, because they did not want us to fall into the same cycle that my brothers did with gangs and with drugs. And which is why I'm a huge proponent of charter schools and vouchers and, really demanding that underperforming schools either shape up or get out. Because I saw it happen with my brothers, and it's another big reason why I am pro-education. And I believe that we need local control in education, but we do need federal block grants and resources. We just don't need them to dictate what we should be doing at the local level when it comes to the quality education of our children. And it's also a core reason I'm going to Washington, because I want to ensure that my daughter has a quality education. I want to impact that at the federal level, which is keeping the federal government out of public education as much as possible. So in my really long roundabout answer or question there, guys, I understand. I became a conservative because of that experience and living in an underserved in poverty sometimes, and we were sometimes middle class, sometimes poor. And I saw what the leftist policies were producing in my community and how they affected my family and my dad, who was a small business owner, and my education and my brother's education, and all of those experiences, as well as having a conservative Christian upbringing. So it's a key reason that I am a conservative. There was another question up here. Okay, so Mark, welcome, Mark. Deb, it's so good to see you. Thank you for joining in. Mark says, take a survey and ask the members of the 25th Congressional District and see what they feel about the gun issue. Yes, I would love to take a survey. More specifically, I'd love to do some polling on this. But Mark, in order for me to do polling, I do need to raise money. So it's super important to understand what our district wants. And one way for me to do that is through town halls, it's through door knocking, it's through talking to people, hosting coffees. If you want to host a coffee, please direct message me, or a meet and greet, or if you want to host a fundraiser for me, please reach out to me. I would love your support and your help, but you can also make a donation at SuzetteValladares.com, which helps me with polling. And you can betcha that Katie Hill has all the money in the world to run polling right now, or what seems like all the money in the world from her leftist, liberal, billionaire friends. So please make a donation so that I can do some real surveys. Thanks for that, Mark. Doris, your question is, what people need to do is contact our president and elected leaders about the red flag law and let them know you oppose it. Put it on their social media pages, via email. It is our responsibility to advocate and voice our opinions and oppose any laws that infringe on our Second Amendment rights. Yes, thank you so much, Dora. You do need to write your representative. You do need to call Katie Hill's office. You do need to call the President of the United States, our state senators, even our U.S. senators. So even though one of them is currently campaigning and not representing us, but really, I guess the less she's in the Senate, the less damage she does to our country. Michael's question here is, there will always be crazies out there. Yes, true statement. I think encouraging family values can help, but there will still be murders. The best you can do is to respond back and take out people like this the second they start acting up. More guns usually lead to less violence. Agree with the majority of those statements. And, you know, one of the things I do, I like to look at data, but I also go by my own experiences. When you have God, religion, or faith in your life, they are a way, they're coping mechanisms for some of the most traumatic times in our life. So I truly and strongly believe that our nonprofits or churches of any religion or faith need to be empowered to grow their organizations so that they can truly be the family and be there as resources to help people through really traumatic and difficult times. And again, lots of experience in my own life and needing to lean on God and family through some very difficult times in my life. John, you already called. Who did you call, John? You called somebody, right? Hi, Jimmy. Welcome. Okay. Did our founding fathers expect that 30 people could be shot in less than a minute, and that we would have a professional, paid military when they drafted the Second Amendment? Why is our rate of shooting so much higher than other countries that have reasonable gun laws where owning guns is a privilege and not a right? Well, first of all, I think that our country is the most amazing, freest country in the entire world and in entire history. And it's a major reason why most people from other countries would love to live in the United States. And the Second Amendment is an important part of our constitutional rights and our foundings. And if you read the Federalist Papers, Mike, why don't you take a look at the Federalist Papers? You might have a better understanding of this. That's not to say that I support or believe individuals should have automatic military style weapons or have access to them or those be legal to every citizen. I don't agree with that. But thanks for the question. Right. So Doris's comment here is, well, if the federal government funds schools, they will dictate on what to teach our children. What we must advocate for our kids to be thought about our Constitution, American history, because it is important. Well, I don't know if I read that correctly, but I do believe that the federal government has an opportunity to insert resources either directly to the states and or school districts through block grants. The reason why I don't support the federal government having more say in the education of our children is because every community is different. Every school district is different. And really the purpose of schools is to send your children to get quality education, but the type of education needed in every community could vary, and whether slightly or dramatically. I truly believe it is local citizens' decision to empower their local school districts and or state governments to make those decisions, which is why I'm a conservative. I think, I know that Washington is thousands and thousands of miles away, and they really have no idea what the students, citizens, and families in Simi Valley and Santa Clarita, Palmdale, and Lancaster want or need in their schools. So, I think we're on the same lines where we want the federal government out, but I see that there is. The federal government does have an interest, and there is an opportunity to fund block grants for like early childhood education or for STEM projects or even STEAM projects. So we live in a district where aerospace and defense, where science, technology, engineering, mathematics, and I say STEAM, I add the A because it's arts, are very critical and important to our students because of the workforce that is needed in our district. And some people say STEM and I more say STEAM because the arts are now becoming more technologically advanced, and we see that in production in the Santa Clarita Valley, and it's becoming it has been for years, well over a decade or two, really grown in the Santa Clarita Valley, and we have a lot of production companies and a lot of people from the Hollywood movie media industry that work in our district. So I think the arts are another important thing to fund, and if we can allocate funds at the federal level to come back to our district, I would support that, but not them inserting their policy. Oh, Jesse, you're here. Okay, I'm gonna add Jesse, guys. Jesse, I already did a little bit of an introduction earlier. We were talking about the recent, or actually, let me add you in here. Jesse, are you gone? I can't find Jesse. Allow your viewers to request to join. Okay, so maybe Jesse, for some reason, I can't find you. Maybe I missed him, guys. Let's see if he comes in again. Eric Alness, the Second Amendment is the ultimate deterrent to government tyranny. Good answer, Suzette. And actually, I usually always talk about one of the key reasons why the Founding Fathers made it the Second Amendment in our Constitution and Bill of Rights is because of tyranny. And they experienced it firsthand with the British government and the tyranny that was being inflicted on them right before our independence. Okay, Jesse, please hold. We'll bring you on live in just a second. So, Fred Thomas, welcome. Welcome, Fred. Thank you for joining us. Ricardo de Real Martinez. So, welcome, Ricardo Martinez. We're not family, or maybe we are because I have a big family. Yes, I'm Latina, and there are some family members that I've never met. As a matter of fact, some of them have reached out to me on Facebook, and and it's the first time I've ever met some of my huge family. Brandon, hello. I'm a recovering liberalaholic. Oh man. So if you're a recovering liberalaholic, then I'm sure that you love Candace Owens, right? So Candace Owens admits, you guys all have to check her out. You may or may not know her, but she is a founder of Blexit, Blacks Leaving the Democrat Party. She's a former liberalaholic as well, self-proclaimed liberalaholic. So, but she saw the light in that, conservatism and free market conservatism is the way to bring minorities and underserved communities and to lift them up out of poverty. And she realized, a little bit later in her life, while she's still a millennial, although she is still a millennial, that the leftist policies do exactly the opposite. And it is really such a shame that we are now seeing that, I remember the party, my mom was a Democrat, guys, and my mom was a JFK Democrat. And the party that JFK led was so much different than the party of today, where we're actually seeing that what a progressive is nowadays is actually a socialist. Call it democratic socialist, call it a socialist. They're pushing for socialism, for socialist ideology and policy that will tear down this country. I have no fear because we will never be a socialist country. It infuriates me. It angers me, especially when I, for the past couple of decades, have been advocating for the Latino community to be more involved in the American political process. And through this and through my own experience and my own family, I know that I have family and friends that have left Venezuela, have left Nicaragua and Cuba, who have left Eastern European countries where socialism led to communism and communism led to oppression and tyranny and even genocide. So it angers me so much that one of the most vocal voices out there is Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, someone who supposedly is Latina and cares about the Latino community, but promotes socialism. Absolutely unacceptable. Mary, thank you. So amazing to see Latinas and Latinos speaking pro-conservatism and against socialism. Absolutely. And it's because we know that, I was born here in the United States, and so were my parents, but their parents and grandparents were born in Mexico, and they've seen what government corruption leads to. They've seen socialism. I actually met somebody about 2 weeks ago whose family left Hungary to escape socialism and moved to Mexico. So she is actually a Jewish Mexican from Mexico City. She's gorgeous. But she left in the 1980s when they nationalized the banking system in Mexico. And there are so many Latinos that have left their countries at the beginning, middle, and end of socialism and communism to escape those things that are now being promoted by the left in the United States. And it's really infuriating. So when we have more Latinos and Latinas from all walks of life, whether they were born in the United States, whether they were immigrants, speaking out about how destructive socialism is, it's important because that's what the left is pushing right now. So Mike Madrid, welcome Mike Madrid. Mike is actually an expert when it comes to the Latino electorate, their voting power, and their voting history, and all things Latino issues. So thanks for joining us, Mike. And I'm going to try one more time to see if Jesse can join us, guys, because he really does have an amazing story. If he doesn't, Michelle, I'm going to add you, Michelle, because you know Jesse's story, and I'm totally putting you on the spot here, but I really wanted Jesse's story to get out there. So I'm going to have you share his story. I hope you feel comfortable with that. And then we will wrap this up. So Michelle, add time that I am sharing, and I think I need to flip it now, maybe. Okay, maybe not. So adding Michelle, are you on? Can I hear you? Is this working? Minor technical difficulties. I'm going to have to test the way this Facebook Live.
Hello.
Oh, you're there. I found
yes,
you.
I
You
am. Yes, I did.
Did you have to go run and put some makeup on?
No, I'm literally post-workout right here. That was like the fastest three mile run I did.
Well, I think I've been missing Jesse here. He was on for just a moment, and I didn't see him. And he just has such an amazing story as the leading Latino conservative with the Lexit movement, and you know him more and more well than I do, and he just has an amazing story.
Yes,
so.
absolutely. You know, I had an opportunity to meet Jesse for the first time at a Lexit event where Candace Owen brought all the Hispanics along with the African Americans in downtown LA to have our voices heard. And what I love about Jesse, first and foremost, is that he loves God, and he understands that these issues that we're facing is bigger than any policy. It has to do with our culture. It has to do with individuals living, especially here in California, and actually in all places of the United States, in chaos, confusion, and he's really dedicated himself, his life, and his mission to bringing conservative values forward. He did that, first of all, because you know, he had a really hard experience. Jesse is wheelchair bound because of his gang activity. But more so than that, he turned it around. He realized, okay, so what's going on? What's wrong? And he just realized that the liberal values, the liberal policies weren't doing anything for him. So he took charge. He decided to create Lexit along with David Basulto, who is also the Hispanic conservative. And they've worked really hard in the last year and a half pushing, you know, conservative values and ensuring that people know that these liberal agendas and policies are not going to fix it. And even today, you know, talking about the shooting, it goes beyond policy and legislation. And I think you hit it right on the nail when you said it's also about our culture. So what we need to do is really seek a higher power. For me, for you, it's our Judeo-Christian values that this country was based on. As Christians, we know that there is a greater purpose, we can't stop tragedy, but we can look within ourselves to understand that there is something that is greater than us that will help us get through it. And it almost sounds callous to say that. You know, for someone who's not a believer, I completely understand, and I almost want to not say anything because it does sound so callous to say, well, you know, kiss it to God. But, you know, it's not that. It's that knowing that through every transgression, every pain, every suffering, that there is an opportunity to look beyond that. Because, you know, it's really interesting. I had a scenario with a woman over the weekend who I just happened to bump into in the market, and was a very interesting woman who I ended up having a very long conversation with, who was a believer. And in the end, it really came down to the idea of faith. And I think that our education system, our media, our reporting, our social influences, everything is so far left from any of that. You know, it's kind of silly. I'm sure people have seen it. You know, the Socialist Democratic Convention, and you know, they couldn't even get through a point because there's so much chaos and confusion. And I think that speaks loudly to what is being accepted as a general norm, because in the place of fear, we err on the side of building a society that is for the most minimal horrific scenario versus living from a place of faith, knowing that our world can be more beautiful, more better than that. So yeah.
Right.
Anyways, I don't know how I got off on this tangent.
Yeah. No, that's okay. You know, I really just wanted, and maybe we'll schedule a little bit better with Jesse next week.
Definitely.
He has an amazing story.
Yeah, I just saw a text come through from Anthony Cabasso, Latino conservative as well, who'd love to jump on at a later date too.
I'll add him, guys, and I know this is going really long, longer than normal, but I was just, you know, I'm really passionate about these issues, and you know, I'll bring Anthony on right now, but just to kind of get to your point, sharing this week or yesterday, I did an interview with NBC about Latinos and about conservatism. And really, we are not unicorns. There are conservative Latinos, Latinas, millennials. We are a pretty diverse voting bloc. Whether our representatives in Washington reflect that or not is a different story. But we're ultimately really here to represent specific values, free markets, limited government. And of course, while I agree that there is a separation of church and state at the federal level, I am a Christian, and at every crossroad that I can, I would most definitely support churches and faith organizations and nonprofits. And also, when it comes to this issue, you're right, we need a higher power. But it's very clear, as to some of the evidence that I touched upon earlier, that early access to early childhood intervention services and really mental health resources are another core responsibility that the government at the national, state, and local level have to take. So I'm going to bring
absolutely
on really
quickly. And let me just say, I appreciate that from you, because I think we need you in DC ASAP. 2020 it cannot be here soon enough. And honestly, you know, in the time that I've had an opportunity to spend more days and hours with you, I really appreciate your perspective, because I think that as conservatives, we can also err on the part of just being stringent. And I think that you make a very good point, which is that there is a separation of powers, and we have to always understand that infringing on people's liberties and rights is not necessarily always the right answer. So thank you for that.
Okay. Thanks.
Have a good night, everybody.
I'm going to Anthony. Bye.
Bye.
All right, guys, I'm going to try and add Anthony, because I saw on really quickly, but it is definitely Charlotte's bedtime, so I'm not going to have too much more time. So Anthony, let's see if I can find you while Charlotte sits here. You want to join me on TV, baby girl? All right, guys. Anthony's actually not crying on. So I'm going to wrap it up, because guess who is crying? Because it's bedtime. Can you say thank you, everybody, for sticking on with me tonight, and I'm ready for bed? You ready for bed? Give me a kiss. I'm tired. She's tired. Okay, guys. Thank you so much for hanging in here with me tonight. I'll be back next Wednesday, 8 o'clock. Direct message me your questions throughout the week. I hope I can address them throughout the week. And thank you so much. This is Suzette Martinez Valladares, Republican, running for U.S. Congress. Thanks.